On February 28, 2026, the world witnessed a dramatic escalation in the already tense Middle East. The United States and Israel launched a major coordinated military operation against the Islamic Republic of Iran. This unprecedented attack, described by the U.S. administration as massive and ongoing, targeted Iranian military, nuclear, and leadership infrastructures in several key cities, including Tehran. Initial reports suggest Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in the strikes, a development that could profoundly reshape the region's political landscape. Experts are now weighing the immediate consequences and speculating on what comes next in this rapidly evolving situation. What just happened? The operation, which U.S. officials internally dubbed Operation Epic Fury, and Israel referred to as Lion's Roar, involved a coordinated air and missile campaign. It targeted Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities, missile bases, and key military compounds, as well as high-ranking political leadership compounds. Both nations have described the operation as preemptive, aimed at preventing what they perceive as an imminent threat to regional security. Iran, in turn, responded with immediate missile and drone attacks on U.S. military bases in the Gulf region and on Israeli territory. This tit-for-tat escalation marks one of the most serious direct confrontations between these countries in decades. Civilian populations in both Iran and Israel have been affected, with casualties reported and cities going into emergency lockdowns. Why the attack happened? Experts point to a combination of long-standing geopolitical tensions, immediate security concerns, and domestic political calculations as motivating factors. Nuclear and strategic threats. Iran's nuclear program has long been a point of contention. The U.S. and Israel argue that Iran's enrichment capabilities and missile technology pose a direct threat to their allies in the Middle East, including Israel and key Gulf states. While Iran has denied that it seeks nuclear weapons, intelligence shared by the U.S. and Israel suggests the enrichment program had reached levels considered dangerous by Western standards. From a strategic perspective, both nations felt compelled to act before the threat could materialize into a weaponized capability. Regional proxy conflicts. Iran's support for proxy forces across the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthi movement in Yemen, has heightened tensions with Israel and the U.S. These proxy networks have been used to exert influence and carry out attacks against allied forces, and both the U.S. and Israel see neutralizing Iran's influence through these channels as critical to regional security. Domestic and political considerations. Within the U.S., political pressures have played a role in the decision-making process. The Trump administration, facing both domestic scrutiny and a global landscape in flux, has emphasized military assertiveness as a tool for deterrence. Similarly, Israel's government has long prioritized proactive security measures against perceived Iranian threats, and this operation aligns with that long-standing strategic approach. Immediate consequences on the ground. The immediate aftermath of the attacks has been chaotic and destabilizing. In Iran, civilians rushed to flee major cities, stockpile essentials, and seek shelter from ongoing strikes. Schools, universities, and businesses were forced to close, and panic spread across urban centers. Fuel and food shortages compounded the sense of crisis. Iran's retaliatory strikes targeted U.S. bases and Israeli population centers, demonstrating the potential for a prolonged conflict. Missile sirens sounded in Tel Aviv and other areas, prompting citizens to take cover in bomb shelters. Civilian casualties have been reported, underscoring the humanitarian dimension of this crisis. The regional consequences were felt immediately. Neighboring Gulf countries, many hosting U.S. forces, were placed on high alert. Airspace was restricted, and international shipping in the Persian Gulf experienced disruptions. Security concerns have escalated in the entire region, including in countries not directly involved in the conflict. Global political reactions. The attack has drawn widespread international attention and condemnation from several global powers, each reacting in line with their geopolitical interests. Russia and China. Russia has condemned the U.S.-Israel strike as an unprovoked act of aggression and has called for immediate de-escalation. Moscow warns that the operation could destabilize the Middle East and exacerbate humanitarian crises. China has echoed these calls, stressing the importance of respecting national sovereignty and advocating for renewed diplomatic engagement. European Union. EU leaders have expressed deep concern over the escalation and have urged both sides to protect civilians under international law. European powers have emphasized the importance of dialogue and negotiation as a means of preventing wider conflict. United Nations. The United Nations Security Council has convened an emergency session. Secretary General Antonio Guterres described the situation as a grave threat to international peace and security, and called for immediate restraint and humanitarian assistance. Middle Eastern responses. Regional responses have been mixed. Gulf monarchies condemned Iranian retaliation, aligning closely with U.S. interests. Meanwhile, countries like Turkey and Pakistan have urged calm and a return to diplomatic solutions, emphasizing the catastrophic potential of further escalation. Expert analysis. Risks ahead. Risk of wider regional war. Military analysts warn that this confrontation could expand into a full-scale regional conflict. Iranian proxies across Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen may escalate attacks in solidarity, creating multiple fronts and drawing neighboring countries further into the crisis. Economic and energy implications. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic choke point through which nearly one-third of global oil passes. Any disruption to shipping could spike energy prices worldwide, triggering economic instability and inflationary pressures far beyond the Middle East. Uncertain Iranian leadership. With the reported death of Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran faces a delicate leadership transition. The power vacuum could empower hardliners, reducing the likelihood of diplomatic engagement and potentially intensifying retaliatory policies. Humanitarian concerns. Strikes on civilian areas, whether deliberate or collateral, raise concerns about long-term displacement and instability. Refugee flows from Iran could increase, putting pressure on neighboring states and potentially creating a wider humanitarian crisis. What might happen next? Experts outline several potential scenarios. Diplomatic intervention and ceasefire. International actors may step in to broker a temporary ceasefire and negotiations. However, Iran may demand significant concessions before engaging, making diplomacy complex and delicate. Escalation to full war. Continued strikes and retaliation could result in direct U.S.-Iran conflict. If either side perceives an existential threat, a full-scale war could erupt, drawing in regional and global powers. Intensification of proxy conflicts. Iran could fully activate its proxy networks across the Middle East, turning Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen into active theaters of conflict. This scenario could create prolonged instability even without direct confrontation between major powers. Oil and global economic shockwaves. Any prolonged disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would significantly affect global oil markets, leading to spikes in energy prices and broader economic consequences for countries worldwide. Humanitarian and refugee impacts. Escalation could result in a surge of refugees, overwhelming neighboring countries and creating humanitarian and logistical challenges on a regional and international scale. Political and strategic implications. The attack is likely to reshape alliances and security calculations in the Middle East. Israel has demonstrated its ability to conduct precision strikes in coordination with the U.S., reaffirming its regional military dominance. The United States positions itself as a decisive actor capable of preemptive operations but risks being drawn into an extended conflict. Iran faces internal instability, potential civil unrest, and pressure to retaliate effectively, all while managing an uncertain leadership transition. Internationally, the attack highlights the fragility of diplomacy in the region and underscores the potential consequences of unilateral military action. Countries with interests in Middle Eastern stability, from Europe to Asia, must now reconsider strategies for energy security, refugee management, and conflict mediation. Human impact. While much of the focus is on strategic and geopolitical ramifications, the human cost is equally critical. Civilian casualties. Initial reports indicate that hundreds of civilians may have been killed or injured in Iranian cities due to missile and drone strikes. Displacement. Thousands of people have fled Tehran and other urban areas, seeking safety in rural regions or neighboring countries. Psychological effects. Fear and uncertainty are pervasive, with trauma already emerging among populations directly affected by the strikes. Humanitarian organizations are calling for urgent aid, emphasizing the need for medical assistance, food, water, and shelter for those displaced or injured by the conflict. Energy and economic implications. Global markets have reacted swiftly to the attacks. Oil prices spiked sharply following news of the strikes, reflecting fears of disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Stock markets in Europe and Asia have exhibited volatility, particularly in sectors reliant on energy imports from the Middle East. Long-term economic forecasts indicate that prolonged conflict could destabilize global supply chains and exacerbate inflationary pressures worldwide. Experts stress that even if the conflict remains geographically limited, the economic consequences will be felt globally due to the Middle East's central role in energy production and trade. Conclusion. A turning point. The U.S.-Israel offensive against Iran marks a critical turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics. What began as a precise operation to neutralize immediate threats has already escalated into a complex crisis with global ramifications. The coming weeks and months will determine whether diplomacy can prevent a full-scale war or whether the region will spiral into broader conflict. Analysts stress the importance of careful, strategic decision-making to avoid catastrophic outcomes. For civilians, the stakes are already high, lives disrupted, cities under threat, and an uncertain future looming. For policymakers and international actors, the challenge lies in balancing military objectives with humanitarian responsibilities and preventing escalation that could have long-lasting consequences. In short, the Middle East, and indeed the world, stands at a precarious juncture. Every move now carries the weight of potentially reshaping international relations, energy security, and human lives for years to come. This article provides a comprehensive analysis of the military, political, economic, and humanitarian implications of the U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran, and it reflects expert consensus on the potential next steps and risks in the coming weeks.